I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo. This is Joe DeMar. I'm your host on For a Green Future. And for the next hour, we're going to be talking about issues that are environmental and ecological, and environmental issues that affect you personally, your family, your pocketbook, your health, and what you could do about it and what you can do to help us get to a green future. Because as one of my guests today, and today we have a jam-packed schedule. We've got Adrian Lowien from the Wood County Park District. She's going to be talking with us. Markie Miller, who you remember last week, she got ill and wasn't able to come on the show. She's coming back this week to talk a little bit about the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And we have ID Studio, my very first live guest on For a Green Future, Neocles Leontis. Hi, Neocles. How you doing?
Good morning, Joe. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
Oh, yep. My pleasure. Neocles is running for city council in the city of Bowling Green, and we're going to be talking to him a little bit, and he might be interjecting a thing or two as we're going along with the show. And then, of course, we have our letter from the future. My great-great-granddaughter, Marie I, once again, very dependable. My great-great-granddaughter sent me another letter from the year 2299, and we actually got our first... we're going to be reading our very first piece of, I'll call it intense dislike mail. We're going to read about that after the bottom of the hour. So, but right now we're at the top of the hour, and as always, at about 8:15, we're going to open up the phone lines, and you can call in at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. This is the best show in the Toledo area, but it gets better every time you call in. And don't worry, sports is on its way back. Right after us at 9 o'clock, the Cheap Seats with Mick Gonzalez will be back on the air. But for just an hour or so, once a week, we're just asking you to think about some things, think about some environmental issues, think about some ecology, because it does affect you. It affects your family's health, and it affects all our pocketbooks. And the theme for this week's show is invasion. Now, some of you may have followed the news. You may know that the president has declared a national emergency, talking about people coming across the border from the south. But that invasion pales in significance to the invasion that we're all experiencing, that our environment is experiencing, an invasion of invasive species, that is plants and animals that don't belong to North America, that come on in here and take over the native plants and push out native species and disrupt the ecosystems. That's what our guest, Adrian Lowien, is an expert on, and she'll be talking with us starting at the 8:15 mark when you can come in. Before we get to talking about the invasions, though, I wanted to catch us up on a few things that we've been covering as we've been going along. One of them is the Green New Deal. And Probably you've heard about this on the news. The newly elected representative from Queens, New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has introduced a bill to the House of Representatives, and Senator Markie introduced it at the same time in the Senate. It's called the Green New Deal, which, as you may know, I am the political director for the Ohio Green Party, but my opinions here are not representing the Green Party, and neither are those of my guests. We're all just representing our own personal opinions. But our presidential candidate, Jill Stein, in both 2012 and 2016, her main campaign plank was something called the Green New Deal. That's what she went all over the country talking to people about. That's the main thing that was on her campaign website. And if you Google the Green New Deal, the Green Party's Green New Deal is still the first one that pops up, because we've been talking about this for over a decade, that we need a Green New Deal. It's kind of interesting how far the media is going to kind of get around the fact that Jill Stein is the one who proposed a Green New Deal, and the Democrats basically copied our language. And they copied parts of our plan, but not all of our plan. So our plan is better than their plan. Just take that from me. But one of the heart of her plan, it's kind of interesting. I'm going off the bill itself. This is on the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives website. They have the bill. And so the heart of her Green New Deal is this. Resolved. It is the sense of the House of Representatives, and the reason it says that is that this is what's called a sense of Congress resolution. It has no teeth. It doesn't actually do anything. It's just sort of a statement of intentions, kind of like, in a perfect world, what we would like to happen is. And so really this is a purely symbolic piece of legislation. But what they say is, it's the duty of the federal government to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions, to create millions of good high-wage jobs, and that actually is taken word for word from the Green Party's Green New Deal, to invest in the infrastructure and industry of the United States, and to secure for all people of the United States clean air and clean water, climate and community resiliency, healthy food, access to nature, and a sustainable environment, and to promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppression of indigenous peoples, communities of color, migrant communities, deindustrialized communities, depopulated rural communities, the poor, low-income workers, women, the elderly, the unhoused, people with disabilities, and youth, referred to in this resolution as frontline and vulnerable communities. So that is what, in the essence of the Green New Deal is, which sounds terrific. Now, some of the things in here promoting justice and equity specifically, you might not expect to find in greenhouse gas legislation. And it kind of flies in the face of the way legislation is usually done. There's a very famous movie. If you haven't watched it, I recommend that you watch it. It's called 1776. And it's all about the creation of the Declaration of Independence. And when they were writing the Declaration of Independence, they were trying to get all 13 colonies to agree to it. And in fact, they had to get all 13 colonies to agree to it, or they weren't going to do it, because they knew they wouldn't stand a chance against England if they were divided. And John Adams is one of the principal guys that made the Declaration of Independence happen. And he and Thomas Jefferson had in the original draft a section banning slavery, saying, slavery is an evil, and, we don't agree to it. And the South, who of course at that time was completely dependent on slavery, rose up against it and basically said, if you don't take this out, we're walking. There won't be any Declaration of Independence. And John Adams was right. Slavery was evil and should have been taken out. But Ben Franklin made the argument, if we don't get the Declaration, if we don't get, what he said was independence first, then we will deal with slavery. He was saying if we don't get past that, we won't get any of the rest. Now, John Adams, of course, was right, and he at the time said, mark my words, if we don't deal with this now, it's going to come back to haunt us. And of course, it did come back in the form of the Civil War, which cost hundreds of thousands of lives and nearly destroyed our country. So he was right about that, too. 100 years later, because they dodged the question, it caused massive problems later on. But, so this is kind of a holistic approach to legislation. But, on the other hand, if you watch 1776, one thing you might be struck by is that everything was being done by middle-aged white guys. That's what that whole congressional, the Congress at the time. And so this is kind of like a more holistic approach. And I don't know, do you think this is going to work? Do you think attaching all these other social issues to a piece of legislation on climate change, do you think that will work? Or do you think it's absolutely essential that we do, that we can't deal with one problem unless we deal with all the problems at once? I'd be very interested to hear your opinion. You can call in at 806-240-1065, and we'll talk about that. And like I said, we're going to be talking about a lot of things today, so looking forward to it. But the reason I brought it up again to this week, and because we were talking about it last week, is that there was a piece of supporting legislation or a piece of supporting a document that came along that they issued. It looks like they did issue it at the time they did the legislation. It's an FAQ sheet, and that FAQ sheet is wonderful. It says things like, we're going to get rid of nukes within 10 years. Clean energy does not mean any sort of fossil fuels. But I could not find that document and could not attach it back to AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or anyone like that. And I have spent the week trying to get any kind of response from her office. I've been able to say, hey, I've got a radio show and my listeners want to know, did you actually issue this FAQ? Did you retract it? Because the devil is in the details. Because her legislation calls for clean energy. But if you don't define the word clean, it can be twisted to mean literally anything. It could be nukes. It could be clean coal, in quotes. So I haven't been able to confirm any of that. So all we have is the legislation. And apparently Adrian would like to talk about that. Adrian, yeah, you're on the air. Hi.
Yeah, hello. Good morning.
Good. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Adrian. Yeah, yes, of course. Adrian actually is our special guest to talk about the main topic for today, and that is invasive plants and the invasive species. Yes, Adrian. Hi. Sorry, I didn't recognize your name there. My apologies. So, Adrian.
That's all right.
Yeah, Adrian is with the Wood County Park District, and we're going to be talking about invasive species. So, hi. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Adrian, I'd like to ask you why should we care about invasive species? Why does it matter if one plant comes in and displaces another?
Well, invasive species, they're not native plants, so they're not native to our natural habitats here in the area. And what they do is they really outcompete our native plants, so it doesn't give them an upper leg. It really, keeps them from being able to thrive. They reduce biodiversity, they interrupt our food webs, and they displace wildlife. In addition, they degrade valuable habitats such as woodlands, wetlands, and prairies. As many listeners may know, especially in Northwest Ohio, we have some very rare habitats that we want to take care of. They create a poor food source for many migrating birds. A lot of the invasive shrubs and stuff have berries and fruits that are really high in sugar content rather than fatty content like a lot of our native shrubs. So it really interrupts those migrating birds and letting them continue on their journeys, and they really outcompete our native plants and make it difficult for them to thrive.
Oh, so like for example, mulberries, which I know are invasive, even though I love them because they're so sweet. We've got a big mulberry tree in our backyard, but you're saying that for the birds and things that are migrating, eating mulberries would be like trying to live off Pop-Tarts as opposed to having, a hearty breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having Pop-Tarts instead of eggs and bacon.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And those birds need that fatty, protein to make it farther in their journeys. With that sugary stuff, they go really fast, for a really short period of time, and then they just don't have the means to continue as far as they need to go.
Wow, I never do that. So what are some of the species that we're dealing with here?
So there's a ton of different species. We have, like garlic mustard, common barberry, oriental bittersweet, autumn olive. There's different shrubs like autumn olive, glossy buckthorn, common buckthorn. A lot of the bush honeysuckles that are popular have been popular for landscaping over the years. The ODA, the Ohio Department of Agriculture, actually banned 38 different species last year.
Oh, wow.
For sale in the States. I don't know if that's something a lot of people know yet, but a lot of the real invasive plants that are kind of on the top of the list are now illegal for people to sell in the state.
Huh. Well, that's great because I know that a lot of the a lot of these invasive species have got their start as ornamental plants. People actually paid money to put an invasive species in their yard.
Yeah, and at the time, when a lot of these plants came over, people didn't know they were going to be a problem. We have lots and lots of non-native plants that aren't invasive in the state, so it's important to kind of find the difference between the two. Out of probably 700 different non-native plants that are common in the state for landscaping and different uses, less than 100 of them are invasive. Well,
that's good to know. So
so just because it's not native doesn't mean it's bad.
Okay.
Native's always a better choice if you can make that decision for your landscaping. But invasive plants, they're ones that have proven to be a problem. You've got your hydrangea bushes and stuff like that aren't invasive. But you need to people. I think it's important to be educated and to kind of look. You can go on the ODA's website and find that list.
So
but your plants.
Yeah. So you're saying that if you're concerned about this issue, you don't have to give up flowers. You could still do landscaping. You can still have
do landscaping. There's lots of great native choices, but if you're not crazy about that look, which not everybody is, there's still lots of other good choices, and there's more and more people and agencies trying to get like real nice, pretty good pollinator native plants available as well.
Okay, so can you tell us some of the plants that have recently been banned? Some of the ones that now we know should not be planted.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of them, like garlic mustard, is banned.
Mm-hmm.
Tree of Heaven, which is a really fast-growing tree. Common barberry, which is it's a shrub, hedge shrub that's very common. Flowering rush, oriental bittersweet, which people will grow and make wreaths and stuff out of. Common teasel, cutleaf teasel. Some of these aren't stuff that people would be selling, but if they were, and some of them are ones that would be, people might be trying to sell, like autumn olive, glossy buckthorn.
Wow. Yeah. So, I think our guest, go ahead,
I would
Nate,
like
please.
to ask you, Adrian, on our street in Bowling Green, they planted these ginkgo trees from China, and they're very beautiful. They turn yellow in the fall, but I've heard that very, very few insects can actually eat the leaves, which then limits the number of insects, and that limits the number of birds that can be in our neighborhood. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, ginkgo's a non-native tree. It's not known to show any invasive tendencies. In fact, most of the ones, 99% of the ones planted for landscapes are male trees and don't produce any fruit, which is good because their fruit is really smelly.
Yeah.
But they're they're not a terrible choice, but again, they're not the best choice because they're not the best food source for native, plants and animals and stuff like that. But they're not invasive either.
But still,
I'm not saying that it would be better to choose a native tree over that. An example could be, like a dogwood, like a flowering dogwood, or a redbud, or something like that.
Or a witch hazel, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we had ginkgos. I went to the University of Dayton for several years, and there's huge ginkgo trees lining the boulevards around the college. Unfortunately, those are all female ginkgo trees, and
oh no,
yeah, and so we actually called them vomit trees because
the
fruit
is not
fruit
pleasant.
is horrible. But what? So I wanted to talk about one specific battle going on between a native species and one of these invasive species, and that's the cattail phragmites problem. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We have a lot, wet areas. As this area used to be a swamp, and then we have a lot of wet prairies up around the Toledo area, and two of the main invasive species that can, kind of come into those areas and take over is common reedgrass, also known as phragmites, and narrowleaf and hybrid cattails. Now, both of these different species we do have native varieties that are similar to these, but they're not nearly as common. And of course, they're not invasive. They're not going to overtake. The phragmites can be difficult to treat. It really can take over an area. It reduces a lot of the biodiversity. It can change hydrology in areas where it's become a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people could still see it right now. It's like a very tall plant with a extremely narrow stem, and there's a big bunch of seeds up at the top. It's about 6 feet tall.
It's a grass, and it can grow 6 feet, even up to 10 feet tall, depending on conditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very dense grass. Like there's a lot of it can also almost be sharp on your skin.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a lot of biomass. Like even after, if you were to kill a population, even after it's there, it's going to create a lot of biomass where it's left.
And I think a lot of people don't know just how important or how wonderful the cattail plant is, because I heard it called the native supermarket because so much of it is edible and all of it's useful. I've had myself, you can eat part of the stem, but a lot of people don't know that. It tastes like cucumber, and it's very nutritious. You have to know what part to eat. You can't just go start chomping on cattails. I'm not recommending that. Have someone show you what to do. But
it's eaten by a lot of wildlife, is what you're saying.
It's eaten by a lot of wildlife, and it was a very important food source for the Native Americans because the pollen can be used as flour. The roots can also be cooked and used as a starch source. Almost every part of it is either edible or usable. Like you can weave mats out of the leaves, and the immature seed head, when it's green, you can actually roast that and eat it like corn. So it's a cool plant, and if we lose that plant, our biology is going to be a lot less friendly to humans and to other animals, like the red-winged blackbird depends on it. So, Adrian, what can people do to help fight these invasive species?
Well, they can keep a lookout in their own backyards. If people have ponds and wet areas in their yard, ditches in their front yard, just kind of keep a lookout and keep track of what plants they have growing there. And if they see something that they're not sure about or they know is an undesirable plant, to do what they can to get rid of it.
Okay.
They can also, do their part by planting native species into their wet areas. That is also useful if you can have something that's established there to keep undesirable plants from establishing. The cattails is a real tricky one because the invasive narrowleaf cattail hybridizes with the native cattail.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, it's questionable, especially where you have established populations of the narrowleaf cattail, which is invasive, how much actual native cattail is still pure and hasn't hybridized yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a real tough one with the cattails.
Well,
because they do hybridize very easily.
Well, so you mentioned planting native plants, and I'm going to talk a little bit more at the bottom of the hour about the Park District's annual plant sale, which is where you guys you've grown native plants in your own greenhouses and you sell them to the public.
Correct. Well, we grow them, and then we have a friends group that comes in and they take our plants and they sell them to the public.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of native plants would be in the annual plant sale?
Well, this year we're going to have over 40 different varieties of native plants. Our real focus is on pollinator plants, and some of the different ones we're going to have is common milkweed, butterfly milkweed, cardinal flower, Joe Pye weed, Virginia mountain mint, some different grasses like big blue stem, some different flowers like brown-eyed Susan, dense blazing star, to name a few. All of the plants are going to be suitable for most soil types in the area, of course, because they're all native plants.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, everybody likes to see a beautiful butterfly or a beautiful bird, but it doesn't always. Not everybody's always makes the connection that, well, that means then we have to have the plants that bird eats and the flowers that those butterflies feed on.
Yeah, exactly. They're one and the same. So the more, the better the food source, the better the host you can give these plants or these animals. A lot of these are going to be your native plants. So birds, butterflies, bees. We have real problems with native bee populations and stuff.
So Adrian, where can people go to get the plants? Where will the sales be?
The sale, we will have a sale at our Park District headquarters, which is on Mercer Road outside of Bowling Green, on the Saturday before Mother's Day, which is going to be May 11th, and the time is going to be 9 to 2. And that's going to be our big plant sale. You're going to have the best selection on that day. We also take part in a plant sale for Blue Week, which is Blue Week is a time where different agencies in the area, like Metro Parks and Nature Conservancy, we all kind of get together and do programs and different stuff for because it's the time lupin's blooming and the Kerner blue butterfly. So there's a Blue Week plant sale, and that's going to be at Secor Metro Park Saturday and Sunday, May 18th and 19th from 10 to 1. And then we will also have plants at the Bowling Green Farmers Market every Wednesday between May 22nd and June 12th.
All right.
Great.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. It's been a very interesting call. I'm glad you could join us. Unfortunately, fortunately, we have a really packed show today, so we'll be moving on. Any last statement you want to give our listeners?
If anybody's interested, another thing people can always do to help out is volunteer. And if you're interested in anything like that, we have different programs as far as if you're working in our greenhouse or helping remove invasive species. You can go to our website at wcparks.org and click on the volunteer tab. And from there, you can always check out volunteer opportunities with the Wood County Park District.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Adrian. And how was your last name pronounced again? Did I get that?
Lowien.
Lowien. Oh, okay. I wasn't too far off there. All right. Well, thank you, Adrian, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay.
You too.
Bye. All right. Well, now it's the bottom of the hour, and I'm going to take just a quick minute to acknowledge our sponsors. And actually, one of our sponsors is the Wood County Park District. And Adrian actually talked about a lot of the things that I was going to cover. Just a few more things. If you want to help with the native plant greenhouse, in this month of February, you can register as a volunteer at wcparks.galaxydigital.com. So you go to that website, you sign up as a volunteer, and they'll let you know about all your volunteering opportunities. There's another one coming up on March 23rd. at the Sawyer Quarry Nature Preserve, they're going to be removing invasive woody plants. So if you don't mind getting your hands a little bit dirty, you can actually help preserve the native species by actually taking out some of these foreign invasive species at the Sawyer Quarry. Other things that they're doing is they're going to have on March 7th the Story of the Swamp at Otsego Park, and you just register for that at wcparks.org. And then coming up on March 22nd from 7 to 9 p.m., they're going to have something called Wildflowers and Wildside Beer and Trivia. That's going to be at the WW Night Preserve, and you can register for that in advance also at wcparks.org. So thank you very much to the Park District for being one of our sponsors, and thank you to Adrian for joining us. Our other sponsor for this hour is DeMar Consulting. DeMar Consulting is a computer consulting company that will come to your home. So they will come, and if you've got a new computer, they'll install your new software. If you need training on something, they will come and train you on your software. They'll do backups for you. They'll do repairs. No need for you to disconnect your computer and carry it in a car. DeMar Consulting will come out to you. The phone number is 419-973-3000. That's 419-973-3000. And the website is demarconsulting.com. DeMar is spelled D-E-M-A-R-E. And then the word consulting, no dashes or underlines, just demarconsulting.com. And you can send them an email that way, and they can tell you what you would need to do with your computer. So give them a call, and don't live with a computer that's got pop-ups that are bothering you all the time, or a computer that's running super slow when you know it should be running fast. Call DeMar Consulting. So there's our sponsors, and now it's time to talk. Neocles, thanks for jumping in there, and glad you're with us today. Neocles Leontis is running for city council in Bowling Green, and actually he is a candidate in the Democratic primary. So could you tell us a little bit about that and when the primary is?
Well, first I'd like to just give a little bit about my background. I'm a professor of chemistry at Bowling Green State University. I'll come a little closer to the mic here. As I said, I'm professor of chemistry at Bowling Green State University. I've been there for 32 years, and I've been following city politics for the last 10, 15 years. We've made a lot of progress. Bowling Green really is a leader in municipal renewable energy. We recently installed one of the largest municipal solar fields in Bowling Green. Mm-hmm. Sounds okay?
Yeah.
Good. And I'm running because we need to take things to the next level. As a professor at Bowling Green, I've seen that a lot of our students, especially our foreign students who come here, they often don't end up in the best housing. Bowling Green has to make an effort to really improve their housing, as has been done in many other college towns. And this is really a win-win thing. This is about providing greater comfort, lowering costs, and we're talking about all renters, not just our students, which is, of course, an important part of our population, but also we're talking about our young families with children who, at this point, are renting because of what they can afford for housing. And the fact is, in Bowling Green, we can do better.
So when you're talking about improving the housing, you're talking about... I'm
talking about safety, and I'm talking about energy efficiency, insulation, and those are the key things. And in other college towns, I'll give the example of Boulder, Colorado, which I have visited. They have systematically improved the housing by passing ordinances. So here's a fact that we learned very recently. As you know, Joe, a lot of older houses in Bowling Green have been converted to apartments. And it turns out that many of these older houses might have been built 50, 100 years ago. And there's no requirement for upgrading the electrical systems. And our young people, they want to plug in their computers and they need grounded lines. There's no requirement for that. What was even more shocking was that there's no requirement to pass a basic fire safety, a fire inspection before you put a property on the market.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no requirement that the landlords inform the renter whether it has been fire inspected, whether there's been basic health and safety inspections to obtain a certification. So this is a very pressing issue. There's a lot of discussion of options, and I feel another progressive voice is needed on the city council. So I'm running in the Democratic primary. There is an incumbent, and we will be voting on May 7th. And I would like to ask the voters in Bowling Green to support me.
Well, I think that, we've said many times on the show here that one of the keys to a green future, I mean, one of the things we're going to have to do is have well-insulated homes and buildings.
This is super important. So that's the second part. First is safety. The second is insulation. And what is the issue here? The issue is that we're wasting. We're asking our young people, we're asking our young families to pay more than they should for utilities. It's literally taking dollar bills and burning them and letting the smoke go out the top. And when we have uninsulated apartments, which we have many, Columbia Gas tells us about 3,000 housing units in Bowling Green are substandard with regard to insulation.
Wow.
That costs people on limited incomes unnecessary costs, and they're also uncomfortable. We have many children in Bowling Green going to bed cold at certain parts of the month because their parents have to choose between food and paying the utility bill. We also know from Salvation Army, which makes a great effort to help people, that the leading cause of homelessness is when people get behind in their utility bills, and then that can lead to eviction. So this is all linked together, and it has to do with the well-being of our whole community, because money that we're putting up in smoke through our chimneys is money that's not available for people to improve their lives, to spend in town. So our merchants are also hurt by this. So the business community really should rally around this. We have more when everyone has more. The job creators in any community are the consumers. They're the ones that buy the products. And that's an important thing for our business community to keep in mind.
Yeah, and that's one of the key things that we're always harping on for the green future, is that the green future is actually a future where you're going to be wealthier. You're going to have more disposable income because you're not paying as much out to the gas companies and so forth.
So Joe, we were talking about this on the way in the car when you were, and I really like the name of your show, For a Green Future. But I want to emphasize for your listeners that that's the only future. If we don't create a green future, and we have a book here called Drawdown, which provides a roadmap on how we can do that with all the different solutions we have to implement, and we literally have to implement all of them, there will be no future for humans. We will literally make this planet uninhabitable for humans if we do not start making these measures. We do not. The environment is not a luxury. It is the basis that makes human life possible on Earth. So, and to the degree that we take care of it, there will be a future. So
you're saying
the green future is the future. Without a green future, there is no future.
I see. So green future or no future. All right.
I think that's how you should call your show from now on.
Well, I appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you very much, Neocles. I wish we had, an hour for each of our guests tonight, but we have to move on a little bit. But I want to say, so it sounds like, and I want to say this because it's often being glossed over and it's being debated, but you believe that government has a role in creating this green future, right? You believe that with
all through the history of the United States, progress has come when with leadership from government, working with scientists, working with entrepreneurs, working with people from all walks of life.
Right.
But the leadership has to come from the government. That's how we got our highway system. That's how we got the railroads. That's how we got the wonderful universities that educate our people.
Right.
The state universities. The state universities were created by Abraham Lincoln.
Sure.
It's a government initiative. Yes.
So that leads us into, this is called a segue in radio world. That leads us into our next guest, Markie Miller, because her organization, Toledoans for Safe Water, they helped put a measure on the ballot in the city of Toledo. It's going to be voted on February 26th. Actually, early voting has already started, so you can get right out and vote for it this week if you'd like. It's kind of a radical idea. It would declare Lake Erie as having legal rights. And Markie, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. And so could you flesh that out a little for us? What does that mean, giving Lake Erie legal rights?
Well, basically, it's our response to the system that we've been living in, where we've found that more environmental laws are legalizing the harms on more of the corporate end, right? So it's our way to kind of bring Lake Erie and ecosystems up to a more equal point where we can actually step up and defend them, and not just have an entity take ownership of a resource and use it and abuse it for the name of profit. So
you're
we're
saying,
recognizing the rights that Lake Erie has that we've been ignoring for so long.
So you're saying that the current regulatory model, which is where the Ohio EPA, for example, will say you can put so many parts per million of toluene into the Lake Erie, on these days for this amount of time. You're saying that, there's no question that approach saved Lake Erie back in the 70s because it was biologically dead. Everything was catching fire. The Cuyahoga River was catching fire. The lake, everything was dying or dead in the lake. And so that kind of approach took us away from that brink, but now you're saying that's insufficient to go into the future.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about what happened in the 60s and 70s, it was about removing, phosphorus and those items from soaps and other products. And things are different now. The situation's a little bit different, where we have more of the nutrients coming from agriculture, and we have voluntary regulations and things that really aren't working anymore. And we're noticing that the regulatory model isn't set up in a way to really protect environmental systems anymore.
Now, I do want to say one thing about that, and that is that there are commercials running now.
Yes.
And in fact, I heard one on this very station claiming that this whole initiative is something that came from outside of the Toledo community, that these paid people are coming in and causing all this trouble and just trying to make it hard for the farmers. But you're from Toledo, aren't you, Markie?
Yes, I am, as well as everybody who's been doing the work and the organizing on this effort. We've been established here for over 2 years as a group, and if you look up the organizations behind these ads, they were established February 6th of this year from a PR firm and law firm in Columbus and outside of Toledo as well.
So the very ones accusing you guys, who everybody, as far as I know, who put this on the ballot is from Toledo, that I know of, that worked on it. They're actually the ones that are from outside the community and using outside money to try to influence Toledoans on how to vote on this.
Correct, and they're ignoring the fact that all 10,000 signatures that we gathered were from people within this community as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Farm Bureau is claiming that this is going to destroy agriculture in Ohio. Do you think it will?
No, I don't. And I think what we need to view this as is not a way to go in and prevent businesses and halt operations completely, but a way to change the dialogue and say, okay, this is causing harm. How can we make it better? What can we do to change it? How can we comply with respecting the ecosystem and the natural systems that we have to put into all the time, that we get back, that's our life support. So it really should be a conversation starter of we need to do better. I also think, though, that if you have a business or an entity that wants to come in and they're afraid of our anti-pollution laws to protect our drinking water, then that needs to be a question for this community to say, well, then is that someone that we want to be part of our society? Do we want them to make up our economy? Do we want them to be, stabilizing our community if the sacrifice is the systems that support life.
Well, you could guess my response to that. I think that there's, I'm 56 now, and I've been environmentalist, for as long as I could remember. Literally back in elementary school, I was reading ecological science textbooks just because it was so fascinating to me how everything is connected. And so my point is that if we were to, there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. We could feed ourselves. We can heat and cool ourselves. We can entertain ourselves. We can clothe ourselves. We can do all these things in a balanced way that doesn't destroy the ecosystem, or we could just do them in a way that damages things, generates short-term profits but long-term problems. And I think that's what we're doing right now with the agriculture. I mean, we're not saying stop growing food. What we're saying is stop polluting Lake Erie while we grow our food. And it can be done. This is not an impossible thing. You don't have to choose between eating and having a healthy lake.
Absolutely. And, I think that there's been this uptick in citizens, for at least from this area, for sure, trying to become more informed on those processes of, what's the difference between a farmer who uses commercial fertilizer versus someone who maybe has millions of gallons of, untreated manure to deal with throughout the year. And we know with this area, you're coming from Bowling Green, the great black swamp, right, with the drainage tile. So we understand that we have kind of a unique situation in this area, and that not every best management practice that works elsewhere is going to work here. So it's really imperative that we get a good understanding of those systems and really think about what's happening, what are we really doing to fix it. And the people of Toledo, since we've already lost our water, 500,000 people already experienced this. It's not a potential threat anymore. It's a reality. It happened. That, we were already inconvenienced. We were already without water. And I don't think we can afford to let that happen again. We're worried about taking jobs away, but you can't have a fully operational economy with no water.
Very true. Well, Neocles, I know you're running for city council in Bowling Green, and this is a City of Toledo initiative, but did you want to weigh in on this, or are you going to leave it?
Well, I think one of the issues with Ohio agriculture is also concerns our food system, and I would be interested in your comments on how, excuse me, how we can diversify. Right now, Ohio agriculture is primarily growing fodder for animals. It's not growing vegetables. It's not growing fruit to nearly the degree that it was done in the past. Could you comment a little bit about that aspect of agriculture, especially as we're seeing California suffering droughts, so that the source of everybody can just go to the grocery store and see that fruits and vegetables are much more expensive than they were a few years ago, and I think that reflects the fact that the California and the regions out in the West are experiencing so much drought they're not able to grow the things that we need here. Well, could we start to see more of our land here in Ohio devoted to growing food for people?
I would love to see that happen. I think that might come down to different subsidies and what people see as the most attractive option in the area. I don't know if I can comment too much on that, but I think that one of the problems we have now is that we do have such a large concentration of, like the livestock operations, and we are producing so much more waste, and that's what's ending up in our watershed. So if we are able to balance that out with more things that we can actually use those outputs and produce less of that waste that's just going to run off and get into the water, that would be one way we can work towards balancing out and not overburdening, this ecosystem.
All right.
And you really put your finger on it. It's about the subsidies. Right. We get what we subsidize, and the large crops, the commodity crops, are subsidized. The fruits and vegetables are not.
Yes. Well, all right. Well, Markie, thank you very much I'm glad we finally managed to get you on before the actual election.
Yes, yeah, thank you for rescheduling.
Sure. What's the date of that election again?
February 26th, and you can vote early, starting, right now it's been going on. Monday, everything's closed for President's Day, no voting on President's Day, but we hope everyone can get out there and vote. And Jobs with Justice is also running free rides to the polls if you're unable to get transportation there.
All right. Well, it's a radical solution, but I think it's an important thing that radical in our current times does not mean crazy. People are calling some of these ideas crazy, but we're in a very dire situation, environmentally speaking, and if the old solutions aren't working, maybe it's time to try some new ones. So
absolutely.
So
the civil rights movement was radical at the time too,
and
so was women pushing for the right to vote.
And those were also called crazy, weren't they?
Right.
So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Markie. We've got to move on, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
All right. Well, those were our guests, and you can also be our guest. We can still take a couple more calls before Mick Gonzalez comes on with the cheap seats, and we're back to sports. At 866-240-1065, we'd be happy to take your call. Right now, though, I've taken a letter. You've arrived when you get your first piece of, I'm going to call this intense dislike mail. This is from the Hill Valley Homeowners Association. And I'm just going to read this on the air because I believe in getting all opinions out there so we can talk to everybody and we can reason out the real thing here. So, Mr. DeMar, and then in parentheses it says, please note I did not say dear. So that's kind of worrisome right from the beginning. We, the members of the Hill Valley Homeowners Association, are writing to demand that you stop doing your show. We find it offensive that you are urging people to do things like putting lots of insulation in their homes. The homes in our subdevelopment were built with very little insulation. That meant the upfront costs were cheaper, and it was easier for us to buy them. While it's true that after about 2.5 years, we end up paying more in heating and cooling costs than we saved in the upfront costs, and it's true we will continue to pay more for as long as we own our homes, and in the end, we will pay more to the gas and electric companies than we actually paid for the houses themselves. That's our right. Besides, here at Hill Valley, we value the peace and quiet of our neighborhoods. Adding more insulation to your house can mean big, noisy trucks and workers coming into the neighborhood for an entire day. Sure, we'll put up with that kind of disruption if a neighbor wants to add an outdoor jacuzzi, but for insulation, please. And another thing. You're advocating putting solar panels on houses. Well, we've banned solar panels in our subdivision because we think they're ugly. And we made sure to ban those panels that Tesla makes that look exactly like regular roof shingles too. Because if God had meant for us to use solar energy, he would have made all life on the surface of the earth dependent on it. Now, cooling towers, they're beautiful. There's a big cooling tower not far from Hill Valley. And sometimes, when the wind is right, the steam from the towers will drift down and make our subdivision look like London back in the 1800s. True, the steam has a funny metallic smell, and the next day we have to wash all our cars and windows, but hey, that's a great time to catch up with the neighbors. And your calls to switch from nukes and fossil fuel to wind and sun power, a lot of us here in Hill Valley work for the oil, gas, and nuclear companies, and to suggest that we should be using our engineering and marketing skills to create clean, sustainable power, well, la-di-da. So, in conclusion, just go away. Stop trying to make us think about things and change our behavior. We have to think when we're at work. When we're at home, we shouldn't have to think. That's why we live in Hill Valley. Sincerely, the Hill Valley Homeowners Association. Well, I'm sorry, Hill Valley Homeowners Association. I'm happy to read your letter and put your views out there, but I'm going to keep doing the show for as long as I possibly can. And one reason I know that this show is important and know that we have to keep doing it is that I get a letter every week from my great-great-granddaughter who's living in the year 2299. Her name is Marie I. And she sends me these letters from the future and it turns out that we get through all this stuff, that we figure out all these environmental problems, and we solve global warming. And the future that she's living in actually sounds quite wonderful. So got a letter from her just this morning. Every Sunday morning, there's this flash of photons next to my bed, and there's a letter from Marie I. So here's this week's letter. Dear Great-Great-Grandpa, a lot has happened this week, both good and bad, here on the Kola Peninsula. First, the bad news. Michael injured himself. They were testing out the supercritical water thermal oxidation process with the first batch of real radioactive waste. What happens with supercritical water thermal oxidation is that the wastes, which are all different sorts of molecules and chemical compounds, get put into a reaction chamber under high pressure and high temperature. That breaks apart all the molecules into atoms, and then we can precipitate out pure elements like pure carbon, pure silicon, pure uranium, and pure plutonium, so that we can then pull out the radioactive elements, and then we're going to inject them deep into the Earth's crust. Well, we already knew that radiation damages metal. It's called embrittlement. And your old nuclear plants back in the early 2000s suffered from embrittlement. Basically, if you bombard metal with enough radiation for long enough, it becomes really brittle and weak so that it can crumble to pieces like dried lasagna noodles. Yes, don't worry, we do have lasagna in the future, and the family lasagna recipe is still safe. Anyway, no one expected it, but the embrittlement happened right away because of the combination of heat, pressure, and radiation, and lots of oxygen, and some of the steam leaked back into a line that was supposed to be feeding cold water. And Michael put his hand on a bolt that was supposed to be cold and instantly got a third-degree burn in the shape of a hexagonal nut that was on the bolt. He's off work for a week, and now they have to come up with a new kind of material to line the inside of the reaction chamber. Michael is pretty depressed. He's like me, not really happy unless he's doing something. Sitting around waiting for his hand to heal is no fun. When I told our friend Igor about it, he sent some healing tea that the Sami people make from local herbs, but Michael didn't really want to drink much of it. But now for the good news. I discovered a new species of bacteria. It lives in the gabbroic layer. That's the layer of the Earth's crust just above the mantle. This bacteria eats methane, and it's totally anaerobic. In fact, oxygen kills it. I haven't thought of a name yet, but I will. This is one reason I'm so happy to be working on this project. There's lots of scientific discoveries to be made, and your great-great-granddaughter just made one of them. I hope you would have been proud if you would have been alive now in the year 2299. I think we're also going to have to discover some new verb tenses. Anyway, love you, Marie I. P.S. It does get better soon. So there's a very nice letter from my great-great-granddaughter. And you can write to Marie I, because I'm writing her letters, that she gets them in the future. She's got them saved in a box. You can check out our website. It's at Joe DeMar for a Green Future. That's JoeDemarFor, agreenfuture.org. And so you can send emails to joe@joedemarforgreenfuture.org. You can also check out our Facebook page, which is For a Green Future. We have both a page and a group, and I was never really quite clear on the difference between them, but we got both of them. You can also give us a call at 419-973-5841. If there's a topic you'd like to cover, we'd be happy to do it. And we covered a lot of topics today. Neocles, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah, and thanks to Markie Miller and Adrian for calling in and telling us all about invasive species and the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And as far as the Green New Deal, we're just going to have to keep our eyes open, because I don't always trust the Democrats when it comes to making the right decisions or doing the best negotiations possible. But it needs to happen, and a Green New Future will happen, and you'll be a part of it, and we'll all be a part of it. And thank you for being a part of this show.
The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run.